I just think that, you know, we've got a lot of issues to deal with. You know, we've got to start thinking about what do we do about global warming and what happens when we run out of oil. And, you know, there are big creative problems that we've got to try and solve. And I do think that theatre, I think arts, I think those kind of public forums are a way of bringing people together and getting them to look at these issues, not necessarily always through cognition, but often through emotion and through the connection. You know, I suppose like in the old days when people would sit around the fire and tell stories. You know, I feel that there's a place for us to return to what theatre can provide, just in terms of bringing people together in communities. Because I think we're losing the art of that through, you know, just through the computer, really. People end up having relationships with themselves. I love my students. I think that's probably the number one thing that keeps me in the job. We get some fantastic students at Massey. I mean, partly because we're an extramural organisation, but we do get these amazing ranges of ages and dispositions and gender. And I really love that mix, and I love the way when you get a bunch of people together in a room, you learn as much from them as they learn from you, and I just enjoy that mix. I think I love the learning environment, and I think part of the fun for me is about how you can enhance that. You know, what you need to do to make that work, make that learning environment exciting, a place where people actually want to learn. You know, so it's not passive; it's a very active space. I think I'm very much inspired by the idea of teaching as an art form. I'm a playwright, so I've been involved in the arts all my life, and it was only probably about 10 years ago that I really started to see the connection between the making of an artwork and the teaching process. And you know, if you think about what making art is, often it's about going into the unknown. But it's about developing a kind of inspiration, it's about developing a curiosity. And it's often about, you know, you have this preparedness, so you get the work ready, you do a lot of thinking and dreaming, but when you're actually in that space of making, it's very intense. And it's a bit like surfing, you don't quite know where the work is going to take you. It's almost as if the work is making itself, and you're being led by the impulse of the work. And if you put that analogy against the teaching process, it's actually really interesting, because you spend a long time preparing, but when you go into the classroom, or certainly when I go in, I try and throw that preparation away so that I can actually be in the moment with my students and really connecting with them. And then when I'm teaching, it does actually feel like, woo, you know, just a wee bit scary, because I don't entirely know what's going to come out of my mouth next, and I have to sort of trust that there is almost like an innate logic that comes out of the aesthetic environment, that if I follow it, then everything will work out. And most times I can do that, sometimes it doesn't work. But then when the students are responding, you know, you get that amazing energy. So I think teaching is an art. And every time I come to it, I feel very humble in relation to it, because I think it does require you to keep learning and to be quite, yeah, to develop a humility. I think you have to be like that as an artist as well. Well, it was a bit of an accident really, because I wanted to teach down in Wellington. I wanted to teach at Vic, because they've got a very big performance department down there. But a job came up here, and I hadn't been in the country very long, because I immigrated from the UK. And although I'd been a senior lecturer over there, it was very hard for me to get work here. So a job came up, and I thought, well, I'll probably just stay for, you know, a year or two. But then I got very caught up. I got very caught up in the environment. I loved it here. I loved the students, and I loved just the freedom that I had to invent things. And so I ended up staying 16 years, and I'm still here. I do think you have to be dedicated. I think you have to be, you know, you have to know your material. You have to be an expert without putting that expert hat on when you're in the classroom. But you do have to know your stuff. But I think you have to really love what you do, and I think probably the best teaching I've ever done is when I've had a really good connection with my students, a real love for what they're doing, got to know them well. That's what they want. You know, I think they want to feel curious, they want to feel excited, but they also want to feel that you care about them. So I think having a kind of loving disposition is quite important too. But I think you have to keep working at it. I don't think it just happens, you know, and I think that moment when you start thinking that you know how to teach and that you're really good at this is probably the moment that you're most likely to fall completely over, you know, because it is about being, you know, very kind of respectful of what's going on and quite humble as well. What's the X factor of a great student? I don't know, because one of the really exciting things is that, you know, you can think of somebody as being quite ordinary when you first meet them, and then you find that there's something about the work, you know, like the theatre or the creative work that you're doing with them that actually makes them come alive. So in many ways I think all students have that X factor. I really do, and I think it's a question of creating something in that teaching environment that will wake it up. You know, I think everyone's good at something in a way, and I think if you can tap into a student's passion and desire for learning and love for learning, then that X factor starts to develop. So I never really think of some students as being more special than others, rather that some people are more available to the work that you offer them than others. And if you can find the right terms that will make them excited, then, you know, everyone's an X factor. Sometimes it's just pure adrenaline that keeps me going. I think I've got quite a lot of energy, and it's really useful, but I do get exhausted. And sometimes, particularly on our campus courses, where we'll have 5 days, you know, teaching 80 students, and it's wonderful, and it's electric, and it's exciting, and everyone's getting off on it. But by the end of that Friday, you're just feeling wrung out, and I find sleeping a lot helps. But finding ways of relaxing with friends, and yeah, I do need to do that quite a bit, to be honest. Yeah, so it is a physical form, and I do think that people enjoy learning when they're physicalising the learning as well, and it's fun. You know, you get to play a part, you get to interact with people in all sorts of ways. It can be quite risky, but I do think it's one of the best ways of teaching. Yeah. I quite like, in a way, I like some of these headings that we now have, like, you know, developing sustainability. I heard Steve Mahari on the radio today talking about sustainable futures, and I do think that that is a really important kind of concept for the future. And creativity. I think those two terms in combination are actually rather exciting. And although I'm not quite sure how we kind of go about implementing them or becoming a university that's actually focused on those things, I think these are good things to be thinking about. And I've always been a great believer in this idea that we work with communities, that we don't just live in our ivory towers, do our research, work with our computers and then go home. I mean, theatre is very important for actually outreaching and connecting with community. And I think that the university should be doing that. So I'm really, really excited about these initiatives. And I think Massey could make a huge difference by kind of reaching out, I think, to not just local communities, but kind of national groups. You know, selling what it does and doing that whole thing of, you know, communicating as a university should. Well, I think we have to start thinking about the way our culture is changing. You know, I think there are going to be some radical changes in the future to do with leisure. You know, I do actually think that we will want to start creating a culture where not everybody is working to the age of 65. You know, where we will have more time for leisure, where technology will be able to take over some of the things that humans normally do. And I don't think we've ever quite addressed that of what the world would look like if we had more time on our hands and more ways of focusing on pleasure. And I do think drama has a huge part to play in that. I also think it's a very important medium for getting people together in a kind of commune, you know, as a way of speaking about important issues. I'm just writing a play at the moment called The River, which is about the Manawatu River, and that's going to be a great way to bring people together to share ideas about their river, and through, not just through, you know, through an exchange of ideas, but through heart, through action, through storytelling. Yeah.